experienced with government a very difficult process of communication. We had to ask to be consulted. When we were promised to be consulted, we had to ask and remind the agency in charge to actually consult industry. And after we were consulted and an agreement had been reached as to what certain how certain issues were to be dealt with, that's not what appeared in the IRR. Again, there was lack of communication or no desire to have that communication, period. So for us to go forward, we really need this. We really need to be able to communicate between the government and the stakeholders and the industry on how best to move our industry forward. Without it, it's going to be a very tough, slippery, uphill slope to move the industry forward. Communication on how to measure the real benefits of responsible mining. And I'm glad that this is not the first time we have Rapa Lopa speak to us. We had you here last year and we talked about the idea of the CSR mining scorecard. And now, from the activity that we had yesterday, we see how far we have come along in the formulation of this mining scorecard. We had a very good discussion yesterday where one of the things that Rapa pointed out was there is still a big gap in the communication, at least about what happens when monies that flow from the mining company, how that money actually flows into communities. And 2 sessions prior to the session that we had on the scorecard, we had the EITI conversation with our friends from Indonesia. And it outlined how mining companies pay what they need to pay to the government and what the government has to disclose in terms of what it receives, how there is an independent process of identifying what these payments to and payments from reports are, and how a multilateral, multi-sector group now monitors all of that. And the point that he made was, but we don't know how that money should be spent. We know where the money is coming from. We know what the government has to report. We know what the government has to push down to the communities, to the LGUs. But how does that money get spent? And I think in our discussion, we said the mining scorecard is what we agree on the ground between the community and the mining companies about what the money should be spent for, and therefore the mining scorecard is a tool by which the EITI is enriched. I don't know if you all got that, but the mining scorecard will identify to the LGUs and to the communities how the money that will eventually reach them should be spent. In other words, the stakeholders will identify what their needs are and therefore provide to the government, to the LGUs, how that money is to be spent. So I think EITI and the mining scorecard can work very, very well. So on that note, I'd like to thank all the speakers, particularly Rapa for that insight. And I would like to say that the communication between the stakeholders should include a point. And that point deals with the indigenous peoples. A couple of weeks ago on the 30th, a group called the Diwata had an engagement with leaders, women leaders of IP organizations, IP groups from Mindanao and Palawan. And the common communication from them was, we are never consulted on what we really want should happen in our ancestral domain. A national law called IPRA law has gifted us with the titles. We are also given an opportunity to choose who we deal with, and we have chosen to deal with those people. But there are others who pretend to speak for us, who tell us that, it's not what we think. They have a better idea of what should happen in our areas. And I guess what I'd like to say is that there should be communication directly with the IPs about what they want. And the aha that I have, having listened to the NCIP discussion yesterday, was, if that doesn't happen, is it not so that an ordinance which says no to a project in an area belonging to an ancestral domain, doesn't that ordinance interfere with a national law called the IPRA law? So on that note, I'd like to say that I think it might be possible for us to see in the future indigenous peoples actually challenging moratoriums. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is my comment. Thank you very much.
Go ahead. Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Mars Bolaño. I just had a lesson in communication from Leo. I am basically an engineer. I talk technical. He's a lawyer now. He becomes a lawyer of a minor if I get into trouble. A lesson in communication was given by Mike. It is a very good presentation of how things can be managed from the start. A crisis allegedly too big to handle, but it's being handled properly. And with only less than 20 minutes, we understood the whole thing, how it is being managed properly. As he said, think about what's good, do it right, and right away. I have that in mind, Mike. Okay. I'll go along as the presenters did their presentation. On Inchera, I had this thing in my mind that a mining group paid $27 per ounce for a gold property, for gold on the ground. One paid $14 per ounce for gold on the ground. So I assume this to be the intrinsic value of a gold property that is still on the ground. Okay. And I had this in my mind for quite a long time, but it is now confirmed that while we have a vast resource for copper, our copper resource is not really that great in grade. So it is one of the lowest in grade. But we have the advantage of lower development, but